What do you do when you're 28, recently dumped, and have an entire Friday night to yourself? Cry, of course. That's how I passed time that afternoon in my living room. I had been an emotional wreck since my ex Albert let me know he no longer wanted us to be a couple. The revelation came out of nowhere and completely changed my life. My usual fun self disappeared. I stopped going the extra mile for customers at the salon I worked, and I lost 5 pounds in 2 weeks. My boss noticed how spaced out I was, and it got bad enough that she forced me to take a week off work, especially because the coronavirus had us seeing only a few customers a week. I had been with the guy for 4 years, and he had a major place in my life. That made it very difficult to get over him, so don't judge me just yet. I would wake up, immediately start crying, fall back asleep, eat a bag of chips, cry, and sleep, and do it all over again. I knew it was unhealthy, but that was my style of dealing with the pains of losing someone I love and of rejection. I spent Thursday in my brown two-piece pajamas. I ate nothing more than a couple of bananas and continued to actively avoid anyone I knew. I had turned my phone off and tossed it into a shoebox under my bed. I had not turned it on in days. Before I knew it, Friday rolled by. The morning waltzed by quickly, and so did afternoon. I got up from my spot on the couch only to use the bathroom, and one other time when the usual delivery guy arrived with my curry chicken. I thought about it for a long time before I decided to take a couple of shots of whiskey. An array of anti-love songs queued up in a playlist, I sat on the soft rug in my living room while I enjoyed not only the buzz of the drink, but also the little clinks the ice made against my glass. I began to feel hungry not long after. It was 9:15 in the evening, and I had till 10 to order food. Once my order was confirmed, I relaxed and poured myself another drink. The sweet notes to the whiskey masked the power of the liquor, and I realized too late that I had drunk too much. I was dozing off when I heard my doorbell ring. It jolted me half awake, and I made my way to the door. One look at me, and I knew the delivery guy was aware I was completely out of it. I tried to tell him I was going to tip him next time, but all I got out was a meaningless rumble and a drunken smile before shutting the door in his face. I sat the curry on the center table and returned to my spot in front of the television. I started to feel my stomach cramp up, so I channeled all my energy towards getting that curry in my tummy. I was halfway done eating when I heard a noise from behind me. I was convinced it was my imagination, and I went back to eating. A couple of minutes later, I heard what sounded like footsteps in my room. If there's any such thing as instant sobering up, that's what I felt myself do. I placed the bowl of food down as quietly as I could and started to make my way towards the noise, my heart pounding. I grabbed a rolling pin from the kitchen counter as I passed it by. I heard another noise. The television was blaring, but I could hear someone opening and closing drawers in my room. I looked across the hall to where my phone hung on the wall. 2 more steps, and I was standing in the doorway of my bedroom. I saw a man crouched over my dresser table. The lights were out, and I could make out nothing but his gender. I watched in terror as he went through everything on the table and then moved on to my wardrobe. My knees were shaking and my mouth was so dry. I tried to scream, but it was as though my entire body were frozen in place. Right then, he sensed me. The man turned sharply to face me, pecking to an upright position. When he started to come at me, I ran. The lights from the kitchen and the movie I had on helped illuminate the living area. It did little to help me navigate because I was so drunk and uncoordinated. Before I could make it anywhere near the telephone, I tripped over a stack of magazines and onto my face. Seconds later, I felt the intruder on my back. "No!" I shrieked. "Get off me!" He didn't budge, yet kept trying to get my hands behind me. I was struggling to breathe and the pain from having my hands wrenched behind me in such an unnatural position was excruciating. I tried to fight him, but I weighed only 56 kilograms, and on a sober day could not fight a mean 6-year-old. He got my hands secured tightly by some kind of rope and started trying to gag me. The gag smelled awful, and I was determined it would go nowhere near my mouth. I fought him for several minutes and even bit him once. He smacked me across the face in retaliation. Ultimately, he won and gagged me. I immediately started to cry. I was so mad that was happening, and all I wanted was to go back in time and lock my door. He blindfolded me next, and then tied my feet together. I threw up twice, from the thought of that putrid rag in my mouth, and from him sitting on my back when I was drunk and had just eaten. I was now completely immobilized and helpless. I had not gotten a good look at the intruder, and I had no idea who'd want to do this to me. As I sat propped against what I believed was my center table, I could hear the intruder going through my house. Back and forth he went. Suddenly, I felt myself get pushed onto my side. I felt the softness of my center rag against my cheek, and seconds later I started to tumble. I knew he was rolling me up in my rug. I started to scream and wiggle as hard as I could, making it impossible for him to sling me over his shoulder like he planned. I felt him let go of me. At this point, my blood was saturated with adrenaline and I was bursting with energy. I tried to wiggle free of the rug, but I had trouble telling which way to roll. Out of nowhere, I felt a tremendous force against my shoulder. I shrieked in pain. Not a second later, I felt another blow to my head, and the lights went out. The first thing I felt when I came to was the incredible pain pulsating through my body. I was groggy and could barely open my eyes. I tried to see if I was still bound, and as I moved my hands behind me, pain coursed through my shoulder and collarbone. I screamed from the pain and started to cry. Most of the tears pouring out were absorbed by the blindfold I still wore, and my sobs were muffled by the nasty gag. I had no idea where I was, but my sense of smell informed me I was no longer in my lavender-scented home. All I could smell was dust and stale air. I shuffled my feet to try and determine what was underneath me, and my best bet was cardboard. I sat still when I heard the sound of muffled conversation. There had been one intruder in my home, but here I heard two voices. Both sounded male. My eyes darted about like mad behind my blindfold as I heard footsteps approaching me. I trembled like a leaf in the chair I sat. Trust me, nothing is worse than being captive in a place you don't know, by people you don't know, and facing a fate you don't know. I was as tense as tightrope as I felt the two people circle me. Please don't hurt me, I tried to say. No reply came. I felt them come to a stop in front of me. They were close.
You think Mom is going to be happy with her?
I heard one with a raspy voice say,
I know she will. I can't wait to show her.
The other one replied. This one had a softer voice, and I figured he was the one who had abducted me.
Why? Is she hurt?
Raspy voice asked.
She fought me. Look.
Softer voice replied.
Just get her ready to meet Mom. Give her some of this so she behaves herself and put some ointment on that shoulder.
Raspy voice said. I heard one walk away and assumed it was Raspy voice. As softer voice rubbed a methylated balm on my shoulder, I begged him to let me go. I swore I would tell nobody, but it did nothing to stop him. Out of nowhere, I felt a sharp sting on the surface of my left elbow. Almost immediately, a strange sensation began to take over me. It felt like my skin was hardening up, and it took me a while, but I finally noticed that I must have been injected with something that had paralyzed every part of me but my brain and eyeballs. For the first time in God knows how long, I had use for my eyes when the blindfold was taken off my face. I was in a room covered wall to wall by old and dirty mismatched curtains. The cobwebs were so thick in the corners that they weighed down and dangled about like vampire-themed decor. I could not tell what time of the day it was because the drapes were so thick. I looked to my right and for the first time saw my captor. He looked 30 at most, was about twice my height, and at least a foot taller than I was. He was crouched beside my ankle and seemed to be releasing me from something. He scurried over to the other side and did the same. Raspy voice yelled from what sounded like downstairs. Softer voice called back. He sounded agitated and muttered obscenities at Raspy voice. Before I knew it, I was moving. It took me a while to figure out that I was being pushed around on a wheelchair. Softer voice rolled me out of the room I was in and onto a corridor. As we approached the staircase, I panicked, unsure how he would transport me across it in a wheelchair. To my horror, we got close enough for me to see a makeshift ramp beside the staircase. I felt sick to my stomach. I could not tell whether they made it purposely for me or they had prior need of it for their mom. My heart was in my mouth as we went over that thing. It looked so flimsy and I was sure it would buckle under our weight. Thankfully, it held up and we made it across. When I refocused on my surroundings, I noticed we were in the living area of the house. It was no less filthy, perhaps filthier, than the room I had just left. Softer voice pushed me into place at one of the spaces at the table. There was a dinner set up, but everything was old, dirty, or both. The tablecloth was so dusty that clumps of dirt sat atop it and had altered the color of the cloth. Behind the dining table setup, facing the opposite direction, was a sofa which faced the television set. To either side of the sofa was a single armchair. Someone was sitting in the sofa, watching the game show airing intently.
Hurry up! The stew is getting cold.
Raspy voice said.
Mother will be unhappy with us.
As he said that, Raspy voice walked into the kitchen. Seconds later, he emerged with the blackest cooking pan I will ever see and set it in the center of the table. It took a while, but I started to smell the contents of the pot. It was the strangest smell, like onions and soap cooked together. I hope they were not going to feed me that.
It is ready.
Softer voice said. Raspy voice nodded. He walked over to the person in the sofa, whom I figured was their mother. My heart was pounding as I watched him tell her dinner was ready. I braced myself for the reveal, for her to stand up so I could tell what all crazy family I was dealing with. To my surprise, she did not stand up. Instead, Raspy voice grabbed her out of the chair and slung her across his shoulder fireman's carry style. He walked over to the table and sat their mom in the chair diagonally across from mine. He sat her up properly and cleared several strands of napped-together gray hair from her face. I wondered why she sat so still, why she was so unanimated. Had she suffered a stroke? I studied her a couple of seconds more, and then my blood ran cold at the realization I made. I had just been kidnapped by a crazy submissive man and his crazy dominant brother, who were both out of it enough to believe that their mother was a mannequin. Escape was the only thing on my mind from that moment on.